or other, of whatever progeny or generation he may have been, ever saw or inquired into so many and such great things as Marco Polo above mentioned, who, wishing in his secret thoughts that the things he had seen and heard should be made public by the present work, for the benefit of those who could not see them with their own eyes, he himself being in the year of our Lord 1295 in prison at Genoa, caused the things which are contained in the present work to be written by Master Rustigiello, a citizen of Pisa, who was with him in the same prison at Genoa, and he divided it into 3 parts. Book 1, Chapter 1. It should be known to the reader that, at the time when Baldwin II was Emperor of Constantinople, where a magistrate representing the Doge of Venice then resided, and in the year of our Lord 1250, Niccolo Polo, the father of the said Marco, and Maffeo, the brother of Niccolo, respectable and well-informed men, embarked in a ship of their own, with a rich and varied cargo of merchandise, and reached Constantinople in safety. After mature deliberation on the subject of their proceedings, it was determined, as the measure most likely to improve their trading capital, that they should prosecute their voyage into the Euxine, or Black Sea. With this view, they made purchases of many fine and costly jewels, and taking their departure from Constantinople, navigated that sea to a port named Soldaya, from whence they traveled on horseback many days until they reached the court of a powerful chief of the western Tartars named Barca, who dwelt in the cities of Bolgara and Asara, and had the reputation of being one of the most liberal and civilized princes hitherto known amongst the tribes of Tartary. He expressed much satisfaction at the arrival of these travelers, and received them with marks of distinction, in return for which courtesy, when they had laid before him the jewels they brought with them, and perceived that their beauty pleased him, they presented them for his acceptance. The liberality of this conduct on the part of the 2 brothers struck him with admiration, and being unwilling that they should surpass him in generosity, he not only directed double the value of the jewels to be paid to them, but made them in addition several rich presents. The brothers, having resided a year in the dominions of this prince, they became desirous of revisiting their native country, but were impeded by the sudden breaking out of a war between him and another chief named Alao, who ruled over the eastern Tartars. In a fierce and very sanguinary battle that ensued between their respective armies, Alao was victorious, in consequence of which, the roads being rendered unsafe for travelers, the brothers could not attempt to return by the way they came, and it was recommended to them, as the only practicable mode of reaching Constantinople, to proceed in an easterly direction by an unfrequented route, so as to skirt the limits of Barca's territories. Accordingly, they made their way to a town named Ukaka, situated on the confines of the kingdom of the western Tartars. Leaving that place, and advancing still farther, they crossed the Tigris, one of the 4 rivers of paradise, and came to a desert, the extent of which was 17 days' journey, wherein they found neither town, castle, nor any substantial building, but only Tartars, with their herds, dwelling in tents on the plain. Having passed this tract, they arrived at length at a well-built city called Bokhara, in a province of that name, belonging to the dominions of Persia, and the noblest city of that kingdom, but governed by a prince whose name was Barak. Here, from inability to proceed farther, they remained 3 years. It happened, while these brothers were in Bokhara, that a person of consequence and gifted with eminent talents made his appearance there. He was proceeding as ambassador from Alao, before mentioned, to the Grand Khan, supreme chief of all the Tartars, named Kublai, whose residence was at the extremity of the continent, in a direction between northeast and east. Not having ever before had an opportunity, although he wished it, of seeing any natives of Italy, he was gratified in a high degree at meeting and conversing with these brothers, who had now become proficients in the Tartar language, and after associating with them for several days, and finding their manners agreeable to him, he proposed to them that they should accompany him to the presence of the great Khan, who would be pleased by their appearance at his court, which had not hitherto been visited by any person from their country, adding assurances that they would be honorably received and recompensed with many gifts. Convinced as they were that their endeavors to return homeward would expose them to the most imminent risks, they agreed to this proposal, and recommending themselves to the protection of the Almighty, they set out on their journey in the suite of the ambassador, attended by several Christian servants whom they had brought with them from Venice. The course they took at first was between the northeast and north, and an entire year was consumed before they were enabled to reach the imperial residence, in consequence of the extraordinary delays occasioned by the snows and the swelling of the rivers, which obliged them to halt until the former had melted and the floods had subsided. Many things worthy of admiration were observed by them in the progress of their journey, but which are here omitted, as they will be described by Marco Polo in the sequel of the book. Being introduced to the presence of the Grand Khan, Kublai, the travelers were received by him with the condescension and affability that belonged to his character, and as they were the first Latins who had made their appearance in that country, they were entertained with feasts and honored with other marks of distinction. Entering graciously into conversation with him, he made earnest inquiries on the subject of the western parts of the world, of the Emperor of the Romans, and of other Christian kings and princes. He wished to be informed of their relative consequence, the extent of their possessions, the manner in which justice was administered in their several kingdoms and principalities, how they conducted themselves in warfare, and, above all, he questioned them particularly respecting the Pope, the affairs of the Church, and the religious worship and doctrine of the Christians. Being well instructed and discreet men, they gave appropriate answers upon all these points, and as they were perfectly acquainted with the Tartar, Mogul language, they expressed themselves always in becoming terms, insomuch that the Grand Khan, holding them in high estimation, frequently commanded their attendance. When he had obtained all the information that the two brothers communicated with so much good sense, he expressed himself well satisfied, and having formed in his mind the design of employing them as his ambassadors to the Pope, after consulting with his ministers on the subject, he proposed to them, with many kind entreaties, that they should accompany one of his officers, named Cogatal, on a mission to the See of Rome. His object, he told them, was to make a request to His Holiness that he would send to him 100 men of learning, thoroughly acquainted with the principles of the Christian religion, as well as with the 7 arts, and qualified to prove to the learned of his dominions, by just and fair argument, that the faith professed by Christians is superior to, and founded upon more evident truth than any other, that the gods of the Tartars and the idols worshipped in their houses were only evil spirits, and that they and the people of the East in general were under an error in reverencing them as divinities. He moreover signified his pleasure that upon their return they should bring with them from Jerusalem some of the holy oil from the lamp which is kept burning over the sepulchre of our Lord Jesus Christ, whom he professed to hold in veneration and to consider as the true God. Having heard these commands addressed to them by the Grand Khan, they humbly prostrated themselves before him, declaring their willingness and instant readiness to perform, to the utmost of their ability, whatever might be the royal will. Upon which he caused letters, in the Tartarian language, to be written in his name to the Pope of Rome, and these he delivered into their hands. He likewise gave orders that they should be furnished with a golden tablet displaying the imperial cipher, according to the usage established by His Majesty, in virtue of which the person bearing it, together with his whole suite, are safely conveyed and escorted from station to station by the governors of all places within the imperial dominions, and are entitled, during the time of their residing in any city, castle, town, or village, to a supply of provisions and everything necessary for their accommodation. Being thus honorably commissioned, they took their leave of the Grand Khan, and set out on their journey, but had not proceeded more than 20 days, when the officer named Kogatal, their companion, fell dangerously ill in the city named Alao. In this dilemma it was determined, upon consulting all who were present, and with the approbation of the man himself, that they should leave him behind. In the prosecution of their journey, they derived essential benefit from being provided with the royal tablet, which procured them attention in every place through which they passed. Their expenses were defrayed, and escorts were furnished. But notwithstanding these advantages, so great were the natural difficulties they had to encounter, from the extreme cold, the snow, the ice, and the flooding of the rivers, that their progress was unavoidably tedious, and 3 years elapsed before they were enabled to reach a seaport town in the Lesser Armenia named Lyasus. Departing from thence by sea, they arrived at Acre in the month of April 1269, and there learned, with extreme concern, that Pope Clement IV was recently dead. A legate whom he had appointed, named M. Tibaldo di Visconti di Piacenza, was at this time resident in Acre, and to him they gave an account of what they had in command from the Grand Khan of Tartary. He advised them by all means to wait the election of another pope, and when that should take place, to proceed with the object of their embassy. Approving of this counsel, they determined upon employing the interval in a visit to their families in Venice. They accordingly embarked at Acre in a ship bound to Negropont, and from thence went on to Venice, where Marco Polo found that his wife, whom he had left with child at his departure, was dead, after having been delivered of a son, who received the name of Marco, and was now of the age of 19 years. This is the Marco by whom the present work is composed, and who will give therein a relation of all those matters of which he has been an eyewitness. In the meantime, the election of a pope was retarded by so many obstacles that they remained 2 years in Venice, continually expecting its accomplishment, when at length, becoming apprehensive that the Grand Khan might be displeased at their delay, or might suppose it was not their intention to revisit his country, they judged it expedient to return to Acre, and on this occasion they took with them young Marco Polo. Under the sanction of the legate, they made a visit to Jerusalem, and there provided themselves with some of the oil belonging to the lamp of the Holy Sepulchre, conformably to the directions of the Grand Khan. As soon as they were furnished with his letters addressed to that prince, bearing testimony to the fidelity with which they had endeavored to execute his commission, and explaining to him that the Pope of the Christian Church had not as yet been chosen, they proceeded to the before-mentioned port of Lyasus. Scarcely, however, had they taken their departure, when the legate received messengers from Italy, dispatched by the College of Cardinals, announcing his own elevation to the papal chair, and he thereupon assumed the name of Gregory X. Considering that he was now in a situation that enabled him fully to satisfy the wishes of the Tartar sovereign, he hastened to transmit letters to the King of Armenia, communicating to him the event of his election, and requesting, in case the 2 ambassadors who were on the way to the court of the Grand Khan should not have already quitted his dominions, that he would give directions for their immediate return. These letters found them still in Armenia, and with great alacrity they obeyed the summons to repair once more to Acre, for which purpose the king furnished them with an army